Okay, this is the second video on the Punisher splitter. After I watched the first video, I realized that there was, for the guys that's really wanting to either build a splitter or purchase one, there's a lot of technical stuff that I didn't explain. I was kind of hurrying through it. So I know that I would want to see that stuff, so we'll do another little walk around and I'll kind of point some stuff out that I forgot. And then the other thing was, when I watched the first video, I realized that I made a mistake doing the sped up portion at the end, and so you'll want to see, you know, like I would, in real time, how much wood we can put out. So I decided we wanted to do it that way. So, you know, I wasn't trying to pull any shenanigans, you know. So the thing is, I'll try not to repeat myself on what was on the first video, but one thing structurally, I know you'd be interested in, that I actually built, the beam is not just an I-beam. It's made out of two 8-inch channels that is called ship and car channel. It's special channel iron that doesn't have tapered flanges on it. And the reason I wanted that, I got it out of the junkyard, but the reason I wanted that, the flanges are square on it, so that gives you a good surface to mount your clamp on. Everything's true. And besides that, it's twice as heavy. When we get around the other side, I'll show you what I did in between the two channel irons, which you can see the plug welds right here. Between those two channels, that gives me I've got 1-inch square bar stock welded around the entire perimeter. But that gives me my gap for my 1-inch plate for the knife. So you don't have to do anything fancy, the gap's already there. So here is a 1x4 solid bar that goes down through, all the way through, sticks out the bottom. So really that's why there's no gusset here. It doesn't need it. I mean, to begin with, you couldn't bend this, you know, almost 9-inch by 1-inch plate. So when it's guided completely through, and then on the front is another 4-inch bar that protrudes out the bottom, and that's what your articulation point, your pivot point is on your knife for your linkage. So that just works out better that way. Besides that, it's a hell of a lot stronger than a regular beam is. So then I wanted to put 2 jacks on, because I see a lot of the commercial splitters that just use 1 jack and they shake around stuff. I like the stability. This thing weighs, I weighed it, it weighs right at 3,000 pounds. So you put the 2 jacks down, it's not going to go anywhere. I think we already talked about in the first video about the chute, but this time I'll lay it down on the back of the truck and I'll show you that it lays right on the tailgate as far as pushing the wood in. But one thing that I did want to show you is that the hitch is not in the center right here. It looks screwed up, like something's wrong. You know, it's not in the middle. It doesn't sit centered on the beam. And the reason that is, if you look at the front, is because, first of all, I was going to be using a wide opposed Onan engine, which are very wide, and I knew since I was putting those big crazy fenders on there, it was going to set down in between them, so I needed a lot of room. And if I'd have made it that wide on this side of the beam as well, it was going to be ridiculously wide. So I just decided I'd set it off to the side. In doing that, that also helped because this wheel sits out here a lot farther and gives me the stability I need for the log lift. It doesn't try to tip. There's no way you could tip it. That, and the third thing that done for me, it makes a real shallow workstation. Instead of having to go way in here past the table, it's real shallow. You can just take a half a step back and go either direction. So that's the other advantage it did. The cylinder, I think I told you what size it was before. It's a 5x24 with a 2.5-inch shaft in it. But the one thing on this splitter that I don't like, I was misled on the cylinder. I searched long and hard to find a cylinder online that told me that it had 12 SAE ports in it, because a lot of the cylinders this size has an 8, which is equivalent to a 1/2 inch. I wanted 3/4 hoses and 12 SAE ports to keep my speed up, because it's got a 28 GPM pump on it. So I bought the cylinder. It sat down here through the winter before I ever pulled the plugs out of it. When I pulled the plugs out, the hole that they bored in the side of the cylinder is only about 3/8 of an inch diameter. So that restricts flow. So what that causes me to have to do to get the speed I want, I have to run wide open. If they hadn't lied about the port size, I could run at half, 2/3 throttle and have the same speed. So I probably, here through the winter, I'll probably take it apart, tear the cylinder apart, modify the holes so I can get in there and clean the burrs up, just because it aggravates me. So that's the one thing about it I don't like, and I should have caught it earlier. On the tanks, I think I touched on the fact that there's two tanks here. One's built out of 8 by 12 box tubing. The other one in front, which also serves as the axle as well, it's got wheel bearing hubs welded on the end of it, and it is a 6 by 12. So I ended up with about 35 gallon of capacity. And what I done was I welded a 4-inch pipe between the two over here, and if we look down here in the sump, down here is my suction line, 1.25 inch suction line with a 8-inch by 2-inch screen, suction screen. So it's on one end, and my return, my 3 returns right here goes through this big 70 GPM filter. But the fluid has to travel 9 feet down through and around before it picks it back up again. So that gives me all kinds of time to cool it off. I haven't seen the thing go over 110 degrees or so so far. So because you've got all this steel mass as well too. These are all 1/4 inch thick, so it's a lot of mass. There was the only piece of steel that I bought new was a piece of 3/16 plate that I couldn't find in scrap, that I made my inner fender wheels out of, and the sump. I wanted the sump anyway between the two tanks because that helps me hide everything. I put battery down in that. Most of my hoses I could run concealed down there where I haven't got a big ratty looking mess running every place. The engine, I told you before, it came off a generator. That's why this piece of end bell right here is part of the old generator end bell. And it was easier to keep it, modify it to make my mount for the pump. It was just a lot easier to do that than machine a new piece. The turbo is mostly for fun. I realized in the first video had some music going, so you couldn't hear it whistling. This time I'll fire it up and you'll be able to hear the whistle so that people won't think I got on there just for looks with no guts in it. It actually does function. But I did, anybody that's a real gearhead will see what I did so that I didn't overpressurize the combustion chambers. I don't know how much the rods would take in this motor. So I've got what this little breather here is for, is to bleed off part of the boost so that I don't blow the motor up. But it is pretty fun, and you can hear it. So the knife, the reason I made these so long, the hooks, you know, they look like they would be vulnerable, but the way the cradle is, the wood can't actually get out there. If you look right here where no matter what diameter wood you've got, this is about as far as it can contact. So these little hooks actually, if you get in something really tough, it restricts it from trying to slide off the end without spreading all the way. It's the reason they're on there like that. I already told you about the openers as far as reducing the amount of pressure it takes. On the lift, on all these pivot points, I just made my own. I bored them, but they all have grease zerks on them. There's grease zerks on top and bottom on the guide and the clamp plates here. And I've run about 14, 15 ricks through it so far, and it's not even hardly taking the mill scale off the plate right there. So I think, you know, in case I do get wear, in between each bolt right here, there's a small shim pack that's made up of about 30 thousandths of small shims. So if I do get wear, all I gotta do is loosen the bolts up and pull a couple, 3, 4 thousandths out of it at a time. So you're set for years of running. I'm just trying to think. I already talked about the auto cycle valve. The other thing is, I realized when we watched the first video that I kind of defeated my own purpose. I wanted to show roughly how fast we could put out a certain amount of wood. I know when I'm looking at videos, I want to see that. We sped the video up there at the last, and I wanted to do another little section here. I've got a loader bucket full of wood and a few big chunks here, so that you'll be able to actually lay my chute on the tailgate this time, and we'll run it, and you can get a good idea of how much it will actually put out. There's faster ones out there, and I'm not necessarily trying to be the fastest, but it does aggravate me about the port size, and I probably will modify that to get my speed up.
So we had 8 minutes and 18 seconds for all that.
Yeah.
So whatever that amount is.
That's probably not quite half a rig.
Yeah.